One of my favorite stories from the Bible is a story that Jesus told in Luke chapter 15. It's a story of a father and two sons. It's a pretty familiar story. We often refer to it as the story of the prodigal son or the lost son. And it's a story of a father who has two sons, older son, a younger son, as it were. And one day the younger son comes to his father and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm kind of like done living here. I'm ready to get on with my life, and I need some cash to make that work for me. So what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to give me my inheritance up front, and I'm going to leave." And the father in Jesus' story honors the son's request, gives him his inheritance. The son goes off and wine, women, and song in a short matter of time. He has wasted everything that he had. It's all gone. He's come to the end of his father's possessions, and he comes to the place in his life where he's only left with himself, and he's not liking that very much. And so he reasons that even his father's servants have it better than he is, and so he decides to go back home and ask for the opportunity just to be a servant to his father. He's walking home, he's rehearsing his speech, but his father runs down the road as soon as he sees him and greets him and welcomes him home, kills the fattened calf, puts a robe on, a ring, and a great party breaks out. And then the older brother comes in from the field, comes in from the work. He hears all these festivities going on and wants to know what it is that's going on. What has he missed out on? What's happening? Somebody says, "Your brother has come home. Your father's throwing a party." And the older brother says, the younger brother, because I missed the blank, right? The younger brother is simply, "Give me mine." He says to me, "Give me mine." And now the older brother comes and he says to his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends." The younger brother said, "Give me mine." The older brother's cry was, "What about me? What about me, Dad? Now, you got this your younger son, my younger brother. He goes off, he squanders everything that you gave him. He's wasted his life. He's wasted all that you worked so hard. He's wasted it. And you've not done anything. What about me?" It reminds me of a bunch of years ago. I was in a van with like 15 adults. We're driving down the road. And 15 adults that in my mind were pretty well-adjusted adult people that they were living pretty good lives, and it looked like things were going great for them. And this song came on the radio. It's a song from Moving Pictures. It's from the mid-'80s. Moving Pictures is an Australian band. And the song goes like this: "What about me? It isn't fair. I've had enough. I want my share. Can't you see I want to live, but you just take more than you give." And as the song came on, these adults who, and again, in my mind, kind of looked like life was going pretty well for them, are belting out this song with all of their heart. What about me? I've had enough. I want my share. The brother goes on, "But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. What about me, Dad?" As you continue on through the story that Jesus tells, you see that the older brother's view of his life was at the expense of his relationships. The way that he was interpreting the world, the way that he was observing things, the way that he was seeing the life that he was living and the events that were unfolding in it, the way that he saw his life was at the expense of his relationships with his father. He says, "All these years, Dad, I've been slaving for you. I'm a slave." His father says, No. says, my son, you are not a slave. You are my son. You are always with me. You're not taking orders from me. You are alongside of me. We're doing life together. And I haven't given you anything. Everything I have is yours. And then with his brother, right? He says to his father, this son of yours. Dad says, no. We had to celebrate and be glad because not this son of mine, your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he's found. 7 weeks ago, we started this series, which I call it The Saint and the Ain't. And it's a series that was really moving on a journey towards experiencing more of the life of God, out of Psalm 84, of being in the presence of, enjoying home with the Father. The psalmist says, blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they will make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. How is it that we take that journey and experience more of the life of God? And the first week is just believing what it is that God says. If we are believers, he said, believe me. And that's where it began. Just believing what it is that God says and what it is that we believe about him and what it is we believe about what he's done for us. Believing that we are his children. Believing that he wants us to know him. Believing that he wants to walk with us on this journey with him. And the second week, letting go. We hold on to too many things that aren't ours to hold on. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. I will give you rest. Lord, I give everyone and everything to you. I'm releasing these things that I hold on to so tightly. Inviting you to carry the load, and I'll walk with you in that. And logging out that we're getting so much information from technologies pouring into that it's overwhelming us and killing our heart and our soul, and just like stepping back and pulling away from that constant feed and making space for God in our lives. And going out, like getting outside into the world that God created. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim his handiwork. Actually going out and experiencing God's creation. He reveals himself to us in his creation. And in those places in our lives where we're so prone to run away from God, instead of running away, leaning in. Asking God to restore those broken places where we've shut him out. And inviting him into those places. And then last week, investing wisely, that we put our treasures in heaven because our hearts go where our treasures are. And so this week we come to the last movement. And it's not the last movement like in total, right? There are lots of other things that we could talk about, but this series is not an eternal series. It's a time-bound series. So it's the last move that we're going to take this morning in this series. Getting more of the saint and the ain't. And the last step that I want to talk to you about is removing more of the ain't from the saint. That perhaps the greatest obstacle to our union, to our communion, to our fellowship, to our connection, to our experience of God is our allegiance to ourself. The greatest obstacle to our union, our fellowship, our communion with God is our allegiance to ourself. Now, I want to be clear when I talk about the self, what the self isn't, before I talk about what the self is. When I talk about the self, it isn't the stuff that makes us uniquely us. It isn't the stuff that makes us unique individuals in the world. It's not our personality right? Whether we're extroverts or introverts, or whether we're organized people or fly by the seat of your pants. It's like you can look at lots of people in the Bible that God got a hold of. I mean, one of the best examples is the Apostle Paul, who was Saul, who was zealous for God in his pursuit of his legalistic righteousness, to the point where he was actually persecuting Christians for God. And when he met Jesus on the road to Damascus and God got a hold of his heart, Paul didn't stop being zealous. He just became zealous for a different cause. He became zealous for the cause of Christ. It's not our abilities that we're called to, that are ourself, right? In the negative sense, our abilities are things that God has given to us that we're supposed to be stewards of. We're supposed to use appropriately, rightly. Self isn't our dreams, our passions, our desires. The psalmist says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Right? The self isn't the things that God created when he created us that are still a part of the very fiber of our being, the things that are truly us. The self is, in the sense in which we're talking about this morning, the self is the pursuit of our passions and our dreams and our desires apart from God. Or even the pursuit of those things in place of God. It's the pursuit of our passions and dreams and desires and the exercise of our personalities and our abilities without regard for other people. The self is the demand for life on our terms. It's the demand for control of our world and to make everything work for ourselves. It goes back to Eve in the garden when she was tempted. Like, God's keeping his best from you. You need to take matters into your own hands. You need to run your own life. That's the self that we're talking about. We think of narcissism as being pride or being prideful or arrogant. You know, it's that attitude, it's my world and you're just living in it. And we all know people that sometimes feel like that, right? It's my world and you're just living in it. But it's not just people who are proud and arrogant. It's people who have low self-esteem and people who have self-contempt. Because whether you're boastful in your pride or have contempt for yourself, at the end of the day, both of those postures are fully focused on myself, on me, on how am I doing, on what am I getting, and how is it going. See, the self, the ego, usurps, steals what is uniquely us. The self's cry is, what about me? It is the cry of the older brother. It is the cry of the people that I'm driving down this van in the mid-'80s. What about me? And its anthem is another song that you will, I'm sure, over the course of your life, have heard people belt out with gusto. I did it my way, right? I did it my way. The self interprets all of life through the eye of the beholder and the interest of the beholder. The self doesn't care that the brother was lost. The self doesn't care that the father cares that the brother was lost. The self can't see the abundance of his father's provision because all he's looking at is what his brother has. He can't enjoy the company of the father because he's devoted to being better than his brother. His bitterness toward his dad and his envy of his brother have him on the outside of this heavenly home, of being in the presence of God, of experiencing God. His bitterness and his envy have him on the outside looking in. The self crowds out the life of God, obscures our awareness of God, thwarts our ability to receive him. Like when we are full of ourself, there isn't space for God to come in to our hearts. So if our hearts are set on home, we have to deal with the self. Jesus says the stakes here couldn't be higher. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 25, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever dedicates themselves, whoever sets their whole life on saving themselves, whoever sets their life on making their life work of fun, whoever does it, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. Jesus says in John chapter 10, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. But the self-life, the life lived on your own, the life that says, I have to make my life work, he simply says, it's killing you. It's killing us. From the inside, full of pressure and fear and anxiety, bitterness, unforgiveness, all the wrongs that have been done, we want to make them right because it's our right. And outside, resentment, anger, rage. He says, the stakes couldn't be higher. It is the very essence and experience of life itself. And Jesus says, and the solution, his take on the solution is radical. Whoever wants to be my disciple, whoever wants to follow me, must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now, it's important to understand, right? Jesus isn't calling us to hate ourselves. He's not. Remember, Jesus says, the first and greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The second is like it, and love your neighbor, what? As yourself. If the call is to hate ourselves, then to say, hey, love your neighbor the same way that you love yourself would be, hey, hate your neighbor the same way that would be cruel. Clearly, if you read the Gospels, if you read the story of what Jesus says in his calling, the life that he's calling us to, the life that he saved us for, isn't about hating other people. It's not about hating ourselves. It is about rejecting the self's demand to have life on its own terms. It's about rejecting not what's truly us, but the part of us that's been usurped by this demand to say, I want it my way. I want it now. I want what I want. And I'm going to make it. It's to say, all those things are true. But you do not get to run the show anymore because you're crowding out the life of God in me. So this morning's message, every week, just two words: stand down. To say to ourselves, stand down. And I'm going to just talk through a few things that might help you. And pick something, try something to just say, I'm going to deal with myself. I'm going to confront this part of me that wants to run the show and pushes God out. It begins simply with prayer. right? We prayed in that letting go week. He says, I give everyone and everything to you. Is to include that in that prayer, Lord, I give you myself. I give you that part of me that wants to run the show. I give you that part of me that wants to be in control. I surrender my self-life to you. It's the prayer that we're going to meet Jesus in later in the week when he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, Lord, if it's possible, take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done. Pray, I surrender myself to you. Starve it. Starve the things that fuel the self-life. Okay? And see, I'm helping you out here because I'm like redoing some of the other exercises that we talked about. First of all, I surrender. I give you myself. The second one comes out of the week. We talked about logging out. I mean, so much of what fuels this self-life is the stuff that we encounter with our technology. It's the things that we find on Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram that are showing us the lives of other people and how great everything is and stirs that desire and that envy in us and shows us all the things in the world and all the places we can know and all the experiences we have that we're not having. It fuels all that. Log out, unplug. If you're one of those people who when you drive, the self takes over and you get like enraged with all the people who cut you off or cut in on you or don't drive like you think they ought to and disobey all the rules that you have in your mind and yet all the ones that you want to accommodate you when you're in a hurry or you need to get in and all those kind of things. If that's you, I want you, like if you're married, just let your husband drive. Right? Just let him drive. And like kick that self just right out of the driver's seat. Make no room for offense. Starve the self, right? Because the self is always offended, just like the older brother, at what everyone else has. And we live in a day and an age, again, log on. Everybody's mad about something. Everybody's yelling and screaming about my rights. And the problem is not that they're not your rights. The problem is the demand for our rights on our terms leaves us in a place of anxiousness, of fear, of rage, of bitterness, of envy. It doesn't, the demands of the self steal life. See, envy starts with, you have it, and I want it. But if I can't have it, then I don't want anyone to get it. If I can't have it, you shouldn't either. Starve the self. What are ways that you can do just to like literally just shut it off, stop it in its tracks? Little things that you can do every day. Something else you can try. Champion others. So much of the self is about me getting what I want and looking at what others have or what others, and my perception of their life is about trying to level everybody down to where I am or level myself up to where they are. And we can thwart that with admiration and gratitude towards other people. To people who are even in a better situation than we are. Pray for the success of others. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Celebrate other people. Because as we do that, like we're putting the self in the back seat. You don't get to run the show here. I love my brother, right? I'm going to delight in the fact that he's home. I'm going to delight in the fact that he's receiving this blessed reception, this gift, this joy. Worship, right? Worship puts God back on the throne of the self. As you release the self-life, as you do little things to push it out, ask for more of God. Right? We're cleaning out the house, and we're inviting God then to come into that place, that room that we've cleaned out, that we've made space for him to encounter us in that place. Today is the commemoration, the celebration of the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem for the celebration of the Passover. And that day, the city was bursting with anticipation and expectation. And so when Jesus arrives in the city, as he makes his way down the streets, praise, exaltation erupts in the streets. But just a few short days later, instead of shouting, Hosanna, Jesus, save us, they were shouting a dramatically different message. Crucify him. And if you look at the story, everyone in this story is looking out for themselves. Judas seizes on the opportunity to stuff his pockets, and so betrays Jesus. The religious leaders are threatened by Jesus' popularity with the crowd, so they want to protect their own interests. They want to protect their position. They're standing in the community, so they got to get this guy out of the way. The crowds want to be liberated from Roman occupation. They want to be set free. Jesus, save us. But they're persuaded that they may have more to lose than to gain. Crucify him. Pilate finds him innocent. He's done no wrong. But to appease the crowds, he turns Jesus over and washes his hands. Even Jesus' closest followers stay with him up to a point. But when things go south, even they run and hide to save their own lives. Self is at the center of every story that Jesus is encountering. And Jesus goes into the garden and he prays with blood, sweat, and tears. And in his prayer, he says, I have a will. Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. This is not what I want to do. But he surrenders the self-will. But not my will, but yours be done. I submit, Jesus, I submit to your will. And he's the only one in the story who doesn't allow his self to rule the day. And what happens next reveals the very heart of God and opens the pathway that we set our hearts on in this pilgrimage at the beginning of our study of Psalm 84. He opens the pathway for us to come home to the Father. See, all the belief in the world and letting go and logging out and leaning in and investing wisely and standing down will not bring us to the home that we desire. That was the older brother's mistake. If I just do enough, if I just try hard enough, if I just work hard enough, if I keep slaving for Dad, he will notice me, he will take care of me, he will welcome me in. And it didn't work. It's through what happens next in the story, it's through Jesus' sacrifice that we actually can come home. That Jesus has paved the way for us to be in relationship, in union, in communion with the Father. All these things that we're talking about are kind of modern day spiritual disciplines. They don't get us there. What they do for us is allow us then, as we receive the gift that Jesus has offered us, to experience the life of God from the inside. To experience the union that Jesus has made possible for us with the Father. We accept that as a free gift. But accepting it, we can still go on doing all of our own stuff, and we do. So what are those things that help us not get home, but experience the blessing, the joy, the life of being in the party, even as we continue through our lives, as we set our hearts on this pilgrimage? We go through life, traveling through dry places, but being a source of water, from strength to strength. That they afford us the greatest experience of the life of God. Lord, thank you for your love and your sacrifice that restores our union with you as we receive your life. And I pray for that part of ourself that still cries, "What about me?" And paws and pines and scratches and pulls and tugs and pushes and shoves to try and get its needs met on its own terms. To do things, Lord, little things that we can do every day to rein in, to push out the self, to welcome in and experience life on the inside. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.